Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. This is a real honor and privilege. Dondi and Thomas, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I didn't really tell Noah and Lauren this, but I'll get asked to speak at a few different things. I'm always very honored and excited, but this was one I was like hoping to be asked to do. And when they asked, I was like, yes, okay, right on. I'm a Portuguese, and so I have some notes just to keep me on time and track. Otherwise, I'll go on tangents and just keep talking. Am I standing in the wrong spot? Where should I stand? Here? Backwards. Here? Okay, sorry about that. So cycle. I told a few people what the topic was, and too many people made the joke, psycho. Yeah, that makes sense, that they asked you, thinking that it was psycho. No, but cycle. The first thing, in our industry, when you think about cycle, I think agriculture came to mind. I think sustainability comes to mind. I think a bunch of things come to mind in what you could talk about in this topic. And I won't spend too much time on the negative, but there is also this idea of breaking cycle and breaking a bad cycle. And I remember attending a conference at a fancy hotel with a speaker from the mainland who was very successful in her career. And I don't recall exactly what the title of her seminar was, but there was a large crowd similar to this one, filled with young leaders, or managers, I should say, of our industry looking for advice. And her speech was along the lines of embrace the revolving door of employees in our industry. And so she's speaking to this group of young managers who probably are exhausted and frustrated with, the idea of the revolving door of young people in our industry. In the hospitality industry, we primarily employ 18 to 29-year-olds, oftentimes people who are in this transitional period in their lives, leaving the nest, graduating from education or pursuing higher education. And working in our industry is a means to an end or a in the meantime sort of thing. And so her speech, to summarize, was explaining, hey, don't stress out that people will be quitting on you. Embrace that revolving door. They want something out of you and us as a company. Take what you can get out of them. And when they move on and graduate, and go pursue their careers, move on to the next 18-year-old. Just go ahead. Don't stress about it. And I understood what she was trying to say, but man, my stomach was in knots sitting in this audience, watching these young people absorb this idea that, don't invest too much into young people because they're going to take what they need out of it and then they're going to move on. Just get what you can get out of them, and then don't worry about it. Oh man. And that is the cycle of our industry. Our industry is designed in a way that I wouldn't say is sustainable. I would say that what we do is use a resource, that there's a new wave of resources every year, and so we get to just keep existing as an industry. But there's a little bit of a problem there when you think about young people as resources that you just replace with the next wave the following year. And that scares me, that's not only what we do, it's being taught by leaders to young managers to embrace that idea of, human resources. And so I wanted to stand up and be like, wait, hold on, listen, hold on. I don't think this is being heard the correct way. Yes, we are a means to an end, and a lot of people will work in our industry while they pursue something else. But how many people here, by a show of hands, worked in the hospitality industry in some capacity at some point in their lives? Right? Our industry has such an impact on society and an opportunity to touch lives in a really positive way, especially at that chapter of life of, finding yourself as an adult. And so you're stepping out of your home, your nest, and you're stepping out of high school education and you're coming into the real world, and then you go and work at a job at a restaurant because the hours are flexible and the pay is good and they feed you. That was my dad's advice while I was trying to pay for college, right? Go wait tables. They'll feed you, the hours are flexible, they'll give you enough money for beer and books, right? Beer being the priority. I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, it's a thing. It's an industry that is very welcoming to this idea. But when you think about how many lives our industry touches, there's a privilege there. There's a responsibility, is the way I put it. There's responsibility to take ownership over the idea that the way we behave as an industry and as companies and as managers and leaders and chefs matters. Yeah? And so I was interviewed once, and the journalist asked me a question that has stuck with me for a while, and he said, all humility aside, looking back at your career, at the end of your career, looking back at it, how do you define success? And I was like, cool question. And all humility aside, which, standing in front of everybody now, I'm worried about my answer being a little not lacking humility. Change the industry. I would love to think that we as a team and as an industry, and there's many other industry leaders here today, have an opportunity to impact the trajectory of society, if that's not too bold to say, by treating our young people with respect and love and care and empathy and accountability and passion. And then when they move on to bigger and better things outside of the industry, maybe, just maybe, those few years in the hospitality industry had a positive impact on their lives and how they behave later in life as doctors or lawyers or mothers or fathers. And, right, I think this time period is such a cool time to get to have an influence, an impact on people's lives. And so the way I look at our industry and my team's role in it is a privilege. People, young people, are now putting their trust, which they primarily put into their families and parents prior, are now putting their trust in us. And man, if you stop and think about the weight of that, you might, reflect on some of your decision making, yeah? And and so this idea of breaking the cycle is kind of what I feel is part of the agenda. But I don't want to spend this whole time talking about what's wrong with my industry and why we need to break the cycle, but maybe rather talk about some of the more positive ways to do so, because I think the question then becomes how, right? I'm very fortunate to be part of a team that founded a company called Lovers and Fighters. The name Lovers and Fighters is inspired by the idea that oftentimes you hear those two things as one or the other. I'm a lover, not a fighter, right? But I think that if you truly want to love with passion, you got to fight. You got to fight for it. You got to fight for what you love. Fighting for love as a philosophy or as a way of life is something worth fighting for, and we hope to behave in that way for our team, our employees who trust us, our guests who trust us with their time and money and occasions and relationships, with our community that embraces us. And being up in Manoa Valley, we're absolutely joining a community and a neighborhood that we're so thankful has received us well and embraced what we're trying to do with and for them. Our vendors, Dave sitting over here, talk about somebody committed to love of a craft and a commitment to agriculture and sustainability and responsibility in farming and consumption. There's love there, and you got to fight for it. And so Lovers and Fighters is a company made up of many, many people, all of whom have a love for their craft and their culture, and they fight for it every day, and I'm really, really thankful to get to be part of that. We do these icebreakers with new employees, so we'll do like introductions, and we'll have everybody kind of stand around in a circle and introduce themselves, and very cheesy stuff, right? if you were a cocktail, what would your personality be, right? And then you always get that one girl who's like, spicy margarita. And you're like, yeah, I see it. But one of the questions that I liked was, if you were a kitchen or a bar tool, what would you be, right? If you were a kitchen or a bar tool, what would you be? You'll have people say, I'm a chef's knife. I'm a utility knife. I can do so many different things. I can break down a whole fish. I can chop, chives. I can julienne. I can brunoise. I can do all the things with this utility knife, right? It's awesome. And one of my favorite members of our team, her name is Ku'lea Kuna. We refer to as our hammer. Hammer is the way she would say it. She's our Papakulea girl who loves so fiercely, but trains really, really intensely. She's one of the most effective trainers I've ever known, but she's hard. And so her tool was a muddler. And if you're not familiar with muddlers in the bar world, it's what you use to, express flavor out of ingredients. And she just pushes, right? And I mean, there's no better answer for Ku'lea than a muddler, because the deliciousness that she extracts out of her people in her pressure applying sort of way is a beautiful, inspiring thing. And it gets around to me. And I'm like, shoot. I'm not really that talented at anything at all. I'm not a chef. If you see me in the kitchen, like if you roll into one of our restaurants and see me back there in the kitchen, turn around, head over to Zippy's. I promise you'll have a better experience. If I'm in the kitchen, something's wrong. I love to cook, I'm just not good at it, and I certainly would never charge anybody for my cooking. I'm not the best bartender. I bartended for a little while. I got asked to be the president of the Bartenders Guild. I was like, wow, me? I don't bartend. The wine professionals that I've had the pleasure of teaching early on have all surpassed me in a really significant way. I'm not really talented at all. But my answer to this kitchen tool is a can opener. And not a fancy can opener. One of those like handled, I don't know if you're familiar with them, they often have like a red metal handle and they're right-handed and you just like press it in there and then you have to like crank it with your wrist to go around. If you've worked in a kitchen, a lot of chefs prefer this can opener and I'm not exactly sure why. I think because it takes effort to use. And the idea of like, one of those, table mounted ones or automatic ones or, crank ones, those are too easy for chefs. They want you'd have to work for it. So this crank thing, and I feel bad for any left-handed cook going in there and be like, this is the only can opener we have? Okay, chef, thanks. But I'm kind of that. I'm a can opener. I think if I had one talent, it's finding talented people. And then just getting out of their way and letting them do what they do, or at least creating an environment where they get to do what they do so well. I got asked another cool question by an interviewee applying for a job, and you could tell she wanted to be great at her craft. And she said, hey, all the greats in their craft, whether it's chefs or bartenders or sommeliers or anything outside of our industry, what do you think their common characteristic is? What's their common trait? And she was looking for something tangible that she could apply to her commitments in her career. But the first thing that popped into my mind wasn't a skill set or a commitment to excellence or high standards or when I thought about all the greats that I look up to and admire, especially in my industry, they're all insanely generous with their time, resources, knowledge, and information. All the greats actually spend a crazy amount of time sharing what they know and believe. Dave, right? Seamus. Seamus Alwyn is the executive chef at the Royal Hawaiian right now. And yesterday, after a big, 500-person breakfast event, He brought family meal to 2 of my restaurants just for the staff to not have to cook for each other. And he just fed us in a really, really more impressive way than we would have done for ourselves. Pato Kubo, Chuck Furuya. The list goes on and on of these people we could consider great, and you could measure their greatness by their accolades and titles and things like that. But they all share this common quality of generosity, of mentorship and time. Yeah. There's something that I'll talk about with my team, and they're always kind of like, where is he going with this? Which happens a lot. But I promise there's always a point. Even if I forget it, I'm like, why am I talking about this? I do that all the time. And they're like, because this. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, here we are. AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, is a pretty fascinating system where there are 12 steps. And I think most of us know that. Does anybody here not know what the 12th step is? Okay. So this is interesting because the statistics are that even if you pass the first 11 steps really, really successfully, if you don't get through step 12, the likeliness of relapse or falling back into alcoholism is almost guaranteed. Almost guaranteed. Not to say that if you pass all 12 steps, you're guaranteed to not relapse. That's not it. But if you don't do all 12 steps, you're almost guaranteed to go back into alcoholism. And that 12th step, those of you who know it, what is it? Anybody? Mentorship, sponsorship. You become a sponsor. You become a sponsor. And this idea that the 12th step, the step that is the difference between success and not success, involves someone else. Caring for someone else. Loving someone else. Taking responsibility for someone else. It's no longer just your journey to heal or improve. It now is a collective effort. Sorry. And this idea that the way we heal, the way we're designed or wired to improve or be better people is in the act of loving others. When I got asked to do this, I felt out of place in a way and unqualified. I'm not a typical creative. I'm not an artist. I'm not a musician. Ben Flores did one of these. He's a mixologist, and right? I'm not a chef. I don't know what I create all that much. And where creativity plays in what we do. I work with a lot of creative, talented people, and I might share some ideas that they improve upon. Our graphic designer, I'll give her this, and she makes this. It's amazing, right? But one of the coolest compliments I ever got in my life, I took my team and we walked into an empty space that was vacant and available to rent. And it was a construction zone, like storage room at the time. It was in shambles. It had been empty for years. And I walked in excited with my team in tow. And I was like, can you see it? And they're all just like, I don't know, boss. I don't know, right? And I'm like, no, really, look at the potential of this room. It could be anything, right? And one of them said, Dust, you have this ability to see a space and see its potential in ways other people don't. And that was a really, really cool compliment that I was touched by and will never forget. But he took it a step further. He said, you do that with people too. This idea of seeing potential in people, right? And then allowing them to pursue it. And that's the opportunity we have as leaders, especially in this industry, with young people who are hoping somebody sees potential in them, right? And why is that a creative thing? Well, I think that's what artists do. They see a canvas or a guitar or whatever it might be, and they see the potential of what beautiful things could grow out of it. Yeah? And so if I had a creative element in this cycle, it would be seeing the potential in people and then the idea of mentorship. And so coming back to this idea of cycle, this idea that our behavior and how we mentor people has an influence. And so I'll try to end with one example, even though there's so many. I got to go work at a restaurant where there was a young man named Hayden Butler. Hayden Butler was a busser at the time. He had a political science degree. His sister was literally working in the White House. His mom is a social justice activist. I mean, he had big shoes to fill in a way, and he was working in the restaurant industry. And like so many young people, he resented it. This idea that this is what I have to do, right? And the restaurant that he was working at the time was broken. It had a lot of flaws going on, and that are not unusual for our industry. Drug abuse, alcoholism, theft. I mean, it was a broken restaurant. And so the people he was surrounded by were not necessarily people to be inspired by or looked up to. And it's easy to say, and I think that's a sad thing, that so many people who end up in our industry because they have to pay for school or make decisions in life that require money, and they'll end up in our industry and they'll end up in places where it's not inspired to love the craft. And I built a friendship with him. I'd give him rides home, and we'd talk, and I'm like, man, this kid's super charismatic and charming. And so I asked him, hey, do you want to train to be a server? And he's like, if I have to. And I was like, don't do me any favors. 2 years later, he's the wine director for the Ritz-Carlton Waikiki. Yeah. And now he's a partner in our company, and he's our wine director for our company, and he's invested into becoming a leader. While we're at the Ritz-Carlton, he was a manager. Who here, by a show of hands, wants to be managed by someone else? Your spouse, your boss, your friends. Nobody wants to be managed. Who here wants to be led, inspired, coached, held accountable, right? And so I would ask Hayden, hey, you need to take on more leadership responsibilities. You're recognized as a leader. You need to, you need to take on more responsibilities. And he's like, I really don't want to be anybody's boss. I don't want to manage people. I don't want to be responsible for people. These bottles of wine without heartbeats, that's my world, right? About a month ago, he came into work, fired up, lit up, and he goes, you should have seen it, man. Sophia on the floor, as the floor saw him at Regal, she murdered it. She killed it. And he's like, I finally am starting to get what you're talking about. The joy and the fulfillment in passing on your talent, your craft, your interest into the next person and seeing them flourish because of it is more satisfying than anything he could accomplish on his own. And for me to get to see him do that for her, and then one day we'll be talking about that with Sophia and her, right, apprentices or young Psalms and whatnot, right? And that's the cycle I think I wanted to share today with this idea of leadership and mentorship and the opportunity, responsibility, and a privilege when people trust you to lead them. I went over my time. I'm so sorry. Thanks. Thank you so much.
On your company, Lovers and Fighters, is that it? What do you do? So my idea is that if I have an idea for a restaurant, I would come to you guys, and you would help me develop it. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, sure. And that has happened, and we love that sort of opportunity and trust. I hate the word consultant. We're not consultants. I'm not a consultant. Consultant has this short-term relationship of, here's some advice, take it or leave it. If you take it and you succeed, you can thank me. If you don't take it and you fail, that's on you. Consulting has such a short-term relationship, but we would love to build a partnership or just a friendship and a relationship. We might advise, but but we own our own restaurants and develop our own concepts. But our hope is to be human development in a way where people within our company can dream, and then the resources that we have are theirs to use to pursue their dreams. Or in some cases, someone will come to us and say, hey, I've got a dream, but I don't have the means. What resources are you willing to provide? And so that's definitely part of the vision, but we haven't quite had exactly that happen yet. Yeah. I think oftentimes the people who have approached us are hoping for a recipe to success that is easy to apply right away, which isn't always always the case or what we do necessarily. Yeah, building culture, right, is a long-term, actually, I mean, unknown amount of time, right? Yeah. I hope that's okay. Yeah.
So this question is about leadership and self-care. You just helped open 3 businesses in 1 year. You've got 2 kids, you've got dozens of employees, hundreds of guests that you take care of every night. How are you taking care of yourself, and how are you managing your time to do so?
Oh man, Sarah, come on, dude. My team throws this in my face too, right? This idea of I require them to take time off, I require them, and they're like, when are you gonna, right? And one tip is don't sleep. There aren't enough hours in the day, so just don't sleep. I think if you earn enough trust with your team, I'll give you an example that happened yesterday. If you earn enough trust with your team where they want you to have this quality of life for yourself, when it counts and when it matters, you do. We opened Lady Elaine, last night was its 6th night being open, and it was also my daughter's Christmas recital at their school. And that started at 6 o'clock, and we opened at 5. So at 5:55, I was running across Woodlawn to get to Noelani Elementary, where I could watch my daughter sing, Jingle Bell Rock, and at 6:05, I was sprinting back across Woodlawn, but I could see my daughter see me, right? And that matters. I think we have a tendency to invest now with belief and hopes that we're going to have opportunity later. We have something built into our vision statement called Quality of Life Agenda. So many people in our industry just grind. When the landlord gave us our lease, the first round of our lease, we were allowed to close on Thanksgiving and New Year's Day. And I was like, ooh, sorry, I didn't realize we're at this point of the conversation yet, but we will be closing once a week, every week, Sundays. We'll be closing on Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, 4th of July, because it's a dead day anyways, and a week off in October. We'll close 65 days a year. So our business model is based on a 300-day business year. And they're like, how are you going to survive with that schedule? And I said, I don't know how we'll survive without it. There's a sustainability, that needs to happen. The idea that we're closed once a week, you have a light at the tunnel, a light at the end of the tunnel every week. You get to throw the parties, not attend all the parties when you're in this industry, but knowing that you work all the way until the 23rd, but then you get to be at Christmas night and Christmas morning with your kids, you get to be joyful all the way up until the 23rd, right? And there's a lot of money left on the table when you choose to close on those days, but you communicate to your team, your guests, your community what matters to you. A lot of people ask, why Sunday? That's probably a pretty good day in the marketplace. Like, yeah, but that's also family day, right? And so, yeah, it's an important thing to refill your cup by and then get back at it on Monday. Yeah.
I have a question.
Please.
So you talked a lot about being leading instead of managing, and I think what is something? So maybe a couple things you've learned along the way to help not manage yourself but lead the people around you. Does that make sense? So like maybe someone, for a lot of people here, have their own businesses and they're like, I don't have a team.
Oh, I see.
So it's kind of on me, and then we end up managing ourselves and not leading. And so how maybe what's 1 or 2 things that you could say? Oh, here's a way you can lead yourself and not just manage.
Yeah, shoot. I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, but I think there's purpose and metrics, right? And a lot of businesses are metric driven. You want to measure things. I mean, nowadays you can get a web designer and a marketing team that will get all of your metrics to measure your success on, and you can spend a lot of time, energy, and resources on that, and that will kind of encourage the managing element. But if you're a purpose-driven concept or culture or company, the metrics, in other words, the profits or the results will be, are that, their results, their byproducts. And so the idea of being inspired for a cause, a why, a purpose, to me at least, is what results in the things that you would normally feel you have to manage. But you get to kind of rid yourself of those feelings of management if your purpose and your cause is clear to yourself and anybody who impacts the success of it. I don't know if that answers that or makes sense. Yeah.
You talk about, oh wow, now I'm nervous that everyone's looking. You talk about giving, loving people, kind of encouraging folks as they come into the industry, right? And that takes a lot of energy. You're investing all this time, all this effort into these people, and a lot of times they will leave the industry. They may not continue using the lessons that you're teaching. And we heard you talk about taking care of yourself, making sure that everyone's taken care of. But I guess my question is, how do you find that point where you decide, okay, you know what, hey, I can see that you're going down another path, and that's great, that's great for you, but maybe the lessons I'm trying to give you or trying to impart here, maybe they're not for you. How do you kind of make that determination?
Yeah. So that idea of time invested into it. In our industry, some people have committed to very quick interviews because time is of the essence, and you need bodies. And so, hey, you showed up to your interview on time in shoes and not board shorts and slip. You got a job. Let's go. Right. Our interview process is long. And we do 2 long interviews with 2 different perspectives, and then we make those decisions together. So up front, there's a lot of screening we'll straight up tell people, I don't know if this is the best thing for you. I interviewed a young lady who had moved here from Texas, and she was phenomenal. She interviewed brilliantly, but she was living in an Airbnb trying to figure out her situation. She didn't really know what she was going to be doing. She was just kind of stuck in this, and we were a relatively new restaurant. That was a very difficult concept to execute. And I said, you got the job. You got the job if you want it. You have the job today, you have the job in 3 months, you have the job in 3 years. The job is yours, but I don't know if right now is the best time for you to take this job. I have friends who have other jobs where you could get in immediately. The training process would be a little shorter, and you'd start making money quickly, and then you can get yourself settled. And then once you've done that for a while and you still might want to come, apply for this job, let's talk. The job is yours now or later, but I don't think it's in your best interest to take it now. And she said, that makes her want the job even more, right? But she didn't take the job. She took a job with a friend. And then I went to that restaurant later, saw her, and said, hey, I thought you were going to come back. And she's like, no, I love it here. I love it, and that was awesome, right? To think that sometimes, there's a really generous article about loyalty, and this loyalty that I've had this ability to build, and it's a really flattering thing to think about. But I don't love it, the word loyalty, because a lot of people will now ask, how do you build loyalty? How do you get people to be loyal to you? How do you, and really they're asking about staff retention often. And my response is, you're asking the wrong question. Loyalty isn't the goal. And if the people who are coming in your care and trusting you as employees think that your agenda is for them to simply be loyal, that won't work out, right? Loyalty is, again, a byproduct. It's a result. It's a metric, right? This idea of staff retention. Loyalty isn't the goal. Having people's true best interest in mind is ultimately what you need to live up to and communicate to them. I've terminated people, fired people, ended in hugs, and was at their wedding the year later, right? Because their termination wasn't, without the idea of what was in their best interest, right? And I think that, that I hope answers the question of, well, what is the agenda, right? And having people's best interest in mind, even if not, especially if that includes not working with you and your team and your culture and your concepts and your values, right? Because if it's not the best thing for them, they're definitely not going to be the best thing for the team and the culture, right? Yeah. Thank you for my lay, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. My question is, what's a piece of encouragement that you would give to someone who's maybe not ready or afraid to step into the leadership space?
Oh, so many people are not, especially in our industry. So one of our biggest mistakes in our industry that we keep doing is we'll take a young person who's good at a task. They cook well, they bartend well, they serve well. And oftentimes this person doesn't have other plans, meaning they're not going to school for another purpose. They don't have these clear dreams. They are in the industry. And they're good at it. They have a knack for it. They're very natural at it. And they're invested because it's their thing, right? They don't have school to work around or these other agendas. It's their thing. And business restaurants and bars so often need leaders. And so what they'll do is, hey, you're a really good waitress. You should step into leadership. You should be a supervisor. You should be a manager. Hey, you're a really good cook. You should be a chef, right? The problem is just because you're good at a skill or a task doesn't mean you're good at leading people, which is a different skill and task. And our industry is infamous for putting people into that role and then stopping the training, right? We would never put somebody into accounting and not show them how to, manage a P&L and be like, yeah, you'll figure it out. But we will put 23-year-olds into leadership of kids, other people, peers, all the time, and be like, well, now you're part of the team who trains, not the team who gets trained. So they stop getting invested into. And that's a really, really bad model. Because then because they care and they don't have a lot of other options, they end up burning themselves out trying their best. And they don't know what a P&L is. They're now responsible for a $3 million operation and 30 employees that are around the same age as them, if not older in some cases. And their leaders who promoted them are like, what's the matter? What's going on? Why aren't you getting this? You used to be a great waitress. You're failing as a manager, right? And I think that's a huge, huge problem in our industry. Often we don't continue leadership development training when we, promote people who are good at a skill. So I know that sounds like a discouraging answer to your question, but this idea that if somebody is interested in pursuing a career in leadership in whatever field, the idea of realizing and remembering that in itself is a skill that can be taught and learned. And if you have mentors in your life to go learn from, go find them. And if not, there's a lot of great books and TED Talks and people out there that you can be self-taught with. Just you have to care to get good at that skill the same way you would hone your skills in knife skills or bartending or whatever it is. A lot of people invest into their own set of knives, but the idea that you'd have to invest into your own set of leadership books, is a new skill to hone. And so it'd be more advice and less words of encouragement, except I guess the idea that you can learn this if you want to. Yeah. I hope that answers that. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.